Well, it's good to see everyone this morning. Had an exciting week. Have Chinese spy balloons floating around. One got shot down, one still in South America. And
Yeah, it's funny, they go all the way across the United States when they shoot it down. It's already sent all the information to these two back there.
yeah,
Gary, did you get that email that I sent you about the balloon? The same fellow that sent those jokes.
No, I didn't.
I saw,
The balloon with the guy hanging from it?
it was a balloon floating across there, and it's the caption, and it had Chinese take out bucket hanging below it. And it says delivery for President Biden.
Oh, yeah, I did.
so that's been a rather interesting. It'll see how it plays out this week, but things in the Bible are coming true more and more every week. Thursday morning early, the empirical weather wizard spoke, and we're going to have 6 more weeks of bad weather. So it's interesting how people put faith in a groundhog that's been asleep for several weeks and wakes up and predicts the weather. Well, that's true.
The one in Pennsylvania did, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the one in Georgia didn't, you didn't see the shadow.
right. The one in Pennsylvania, they have they heat the ground to get him up. Yeah, they got those rods in the ground, and they heat the ground up so the groundhog will come out.
I didn't know that. I
They
thought
said he's only been accurate about 40% of the time.
Yeah.
You can basically guess better than that.
I thought he was a pet or something that they just kept. I didn't know that they brought him up out of the ground.
Oh yeah, they
He's
heat.
hibernating, yeah.
Yeah, he's hibernating, and this is the best fed, well kept groundhog probably in the world. Because we used to have, we had groundhogs up in North Carolina, but this one is taken care of, and they show pictures of him, and he's
They said they've been doing that 137 years. I didn't realize it was that long.
yeah. But it's interesting where people have their oh, the groundhog's going to do this, and everybody was talking about the groundhog, and I'm thinking, it's like Gary said, he's only accurate about 45% of the time over the duration. So I'm not sure I would put a lot of stock in somebody that's been asleep and gets woke up.
Do y'all still get the almanac, Farmer's Almanac?
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing that's been around a while.
Yes. My father planted by the almanac.
Yeah, a lot of them did.
A lot of people did.
They took the almanac and it said, go plant your carrots, and you went and planted your carrots on whatever day it said go plant them. You planted your carrots on that day, and you planted your potatoes on that day. And
It's a good way to kind of educate the child as you come up. So that, I'll tell you why, you gotta be out there because it's in the almanac. So go out there and plant those potatoes.
of course, we did, a couple of days, it was raining, and we waited till it quit raining. But pretty close to the date, that's when my father would plant. He'd go get the almanac and get his seeds ready, and we'd plant. If weather permitting, we planted. So yeah, it's interesting. It's already February. I told Sylvia we're gonna have to start thinking about Christmas. It's gonna be here before you know it. She boned me on the head again. So, but yeah, time is flying by. It's good to see everyone, and we're in lesson 10 in our book, And we've got 3 more lessons. Last lesson is February 26th, and then March, we're going to start our new thing. Does anyone have a particular book they want to study next 13 weeks, or do you want me to pick one?
You can pick one, but Revelation's getting awful close.
Well, I started to say, I just
That,
I just did Revelation not too long ago and made those discs, so we can do Revelation.
No, I just was saying that's getting close, so.
Oh, it's getting real close.
No, I think you pick one, that's fine with me.
Well, y'all can think about it, and next week we can decide if I get to pick. I was going to do Genesis.
That's good.
Thought that would be a good place with all the controversy that's going on in the world about marriage and men and women and who's a man and who's a woman. I thought, at least go back to the beginning and read what God says about marriage and our men and women and so forth, and races and stuff like that. So, but anyway, we can talk about it more next week, but I just wanted, to bring everybody up to date with where we're at and where we're going and so forth. And thank you, Billy, for the treasurer's report. That was very nice.
It's a little late.
Do what?
It's a little late.
That's okay.
That's okay, we just got something from the internal revenue. So they were a little late.
But I like to know where my money's going, so I thought everybody else might want to know too.
Well, yeah, that's, it's always good to know where your money's going. So,
food.
and I appreciate you doing that. We can see by there that we do have inflation on chicken. Of course, you don't have to see a report, just go to the grocery store. And
That's just within 6 months.
yes, that's makes it even more alarming to me.
$25 in 6 months.
I mean, that's alarming. But we know
What did you do in 6 months?
as we get
Chicken went up 20%.
closer and closer
Did it really?
Yeah, on that,
to the last days that
from the last time.
finances will get out of hand, and we know that we will have inflation at 800%. So it's going to get worse. I think we're just getting a glimpse of it, of what is coming. And it's somewhat alarming to realize what's going on and what's being said and done.
We just had a guy that's visited for the third day, for the third time Sunday, and he's in need of things. His house was totally destroyed in Britain. And he's got a 9-year-old son. And so Craig is meeting, he's gonna be talking to him, but probably Lisa's gonna put out a message that there's someone in need of furniture. And he's given me several things like a sofa. He just gave me a few things. He's living on James Street right now.
Eric Shelley's got a sofa, if you hadn't gotten rid of it, Don's.
Okay. Anyway, just watch, if y'all watch it, like with, Gerald puts messages on in that same one Lisa does.
Yeah, I take Lisa's message and forward it to the class.
Okay.
Yeah, Craig asked me 2 years ago to do that. He personally said, Gerald, will you have an email list? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, whatever Lisa sends, will you send it out? And I said, okay. And I just, like I told the class, you may get the same email 3 times, but there is a button on the computer called delete. Press it.
But there are some people who get yours that don't get the church one.
Right there, and I have learned that as well. There are people that get my email that don't want the church email, and I don't ask questions. I do what I'm asked to do. Just like Mary Cook is still on the list, and she lives in Alabama, but she asked me personally, "Don't take me off." And Betty Norton, the same way. She's on the list. She asked me, "Don't take me off." So there are people that are on our prayer list that have been in our class but don't necessarily live here. And then there's a second list that goes out to my former class members that are in North Georgia and Alabama and so forth. So I publish 2 prayer lists every week for our class and former class, because they don't know any of you and you don't know them, but I have 2 different lists going.
Well, we went to Griffin one day this week because I started cleaning out my closets and everything. And it was starting to get cold, and I had coats to get rid of. And we went to this place that was supposed to be it. They didn't take clothing. So we didn't know where any other place was.
I know what you were talking about, Vicky, yeah.
I call Hope House. They'll come right to your house, you put it in the bag, and they'll set up a day, and they'll come right by and pick it up from your house.
Hope House?
Hope House, yeah, I can, as a matter of fact, they just picked up from me this week. They do Inspire and Hope House, but they work together. They take anything, pots and pans, dishes that are usable, clothes for men, women, children, they do all that. And they'll come, that's what I like. You sit it out on the porch, you put your name on it, and they come and get it. So,
They'll put an email on note to me when they're coming in, to me and Gene, and also they'll give you a call once you're on there. And they're very nice. We're gonna be in your neighborhood, and you say, well, I don't have.
they call you too? Yeah, Hope
Yeah.
House will call, they send me, I get texts from them too.
We tried that, and we did that when we lived over in Hampton. And then we found out that there was people following the truck and finding out the route, and then they would come before the truck and take the stuff before the truck got there.
Oh, really?
They were stealing it. Yeah, they follow the truck around and get the route down, and then when they know it's the pickup date, they'll go about 30 minutes before the truck does, and they'll take all the stuff.
Well, that doesn't bother me so much because I notice on our street, a lot of times people will put food or stuff out that other people could use. And I see the minority picking it up and everything, and I feel they need it, or they wouldn't be doing that.
Right. Well, if I'm giving it to the Hope House or somewhere, I'd like to know it got there. To the people. If someone else needs it, then, they need to go through the right ways to get it. You don't need to go out and steal it. That's my whole thing but anyway. We're in Book of John, chapter 8. We'll start in verse 1. Now, we're still in the Feast of Tabernacles, or Feast of Booths. If you look at the little booths, little thicket booths with palm leaves on it, we're still in here. Jesus has just finished speaking. And it says in verse 1, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. The previous verse in chapter 7, the last verse says, people went home. Well, Jesus didn't really have a home. He stayed a lot in Capernaum, But we know that when he was outside in Jerusalem, he stayed at different places. We know he stayed with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus some. But here he went to the Mount of Olives. Now, where in the Mount of Olives, we don't know, doesn't tell us. But I spent an entire day when I was in Israel on the Mount of Olives. It's a very interesting place, very large place. And so there were plenty of space there, and I assume maybe he slept outside. We don't know. But, some of them olive trees are huge, hundreds of years old. And so, verse 2, now early in the morning, he came again into the temple. So Jesus has been teaching in the temple. Now he leaves and goes to get some rest, get away from the crowd. And he comes back and he goes back to the temple and he's teaching. So this is, last week everybody was stunned. How did he know the letters? How did he learn this? He didn't go to rabbi school. Of course, they're trying to figure all this out. And, some people just don't grasp who he really is, that he's the Son of God. But anyway, he's teaching in the temple, and all the people came to him. In other words, once they saw him, he got a crowd. And we see that throughout his ministry, Jesus attracted a crowd of people. And he sat down and taught them. And Jesus, was trying to teach them the principles that they would need for the kingdom of God. And then our interesting people show up. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. Now notice, for adultery, there's got to be two. Okay, there's got to be two. It's not, there's a man and there's a woman. Only the woman is brought. Now, if you want to understand all the circumstances and how this is to be judged, when you get home this afternoon, read the 22nd chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, because if it's an unmarried woman and a married man, it's one circumstance. If they're both married, it's different. If the woman's married and the man's not married, there's a lot of circumstances when, on who's married and who's not married. And it's also a distinction of, is it consent or was it rape? And so the whole 22nd chapter of Deuteronomy goes into the ifs, ands, and, what the judgment is. Normally, if it's two married people that are doing this, they are both brought and get stoned. That's sort of, what's the law is. It doesn't tell us. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery. Notice this last phrase, in the very act. Now, a lot of people think because of that, this was a setup. Because how would they know when this was going to happen to be able to catch her? I mean, that's sort of interesting in the fact that, they caught her in the very act, so they think this was kind of a setup kind of thing. Because how would you know unless there had to be some information flowing for them to catch someone in the very act? Now, Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? Now, this goes back to Deuteronomy chapter 22, and it does say that both will be brought before the Sanhedrin, have to have 2 witnesses, and that they would be taken outside the city and stoned. That's what it said. But, we only got 1. We don't have 2. So once again, they're not fulfilling the law. You're supposed to bring the man and the woman before them. And they've only brought the woman. So there's some, what's really going on. And Jesus knows their heart. This, they said, testing him, Jesus, that they might have something of which to accuse him. They're trying to figure out, get Jesus' take on this because they're trying to trap him. And he knows this. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger as though he did not hear. Now, what did Jesus write on the ground? We have no idea. There are hundreds of ideas. All the Jewish rabbis have an idea. Several of the early church fathers have ideas, but that's all they are, ideas. No one knows. When you get to heaven and see Jesus, you can ask him. There's I don't even think we need to speculate. He may have just been doodling just to try the patience of the scribes and Pharisees. They're hot on this case. We're going to get him now. We got him. And he's sitting there and he's doodling on the ground with his finger.
That doodling is a memory of mine. Anybody ever doodle for doodle bugs? Hey, and you can picture that as somebody, he could have been just tapping his fingers too, like, well, they'll get to it in a minute.
Yeah.
But I remember going up under the farmhouse, which was not underpinned, as doodle bug, come get your milk and bread, your house is on fire. Looking for those doodle bugs. So that's a good explanation of.
But I think, yeah, because, they're intense. They've got this woman here, and the scribe and Pharisees don't tell us how many, and boy, they're on this thing, and they're intense. And Jesus is just kind of relaxed, and he kind of sits down, and he starts, doodling on the ground, and it's like they're waiting for him to say something, and he doesn't say anything. He's doodling on the ground. And it's like, you can feel the tension now because he didn't answer him. He's writing on the ground with his finger, and you can feel the tension in the air probably building now. Notice in verse 7, so when they continued asking him, in other words, they didn't let it go. They kept pressing. He raised himself up and said to them, now notice this, he who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. Oh boy. went to the heart of the problem. If you don't have any sin in your life, you can throw the first stone. In other words, you better make sure your house is clean before you try to clean somebody else's. And he's, he gets to the heart of the problem. Now notice in verse 8, and again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. So Jesus is just kind of low-key, being calm about the whole situation and waiting to see what's going to happen next. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. So it sounds like there were several people there. And as they pondered what Jesus said, they quietly left. And notice they went in order from the oldest to the youngest. He stepped on some toes that day, as we would say. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Now remember, they're in the temple area. It doesn't say exactly which part, but they're in the temple area, and now Jesus is alone with this woman. When Jesus has raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" So we see here that he wants to know where the accusers are. She said, "No one, Lord." There's no one left. And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Now, Jesus recognized the woman had sinned. And he said, "Go and sin no more." You got to stop what you're doing. It's wrong. And, at this point, we don't know what happened in the woman's life following this event. We're not told the woman's name. We're not given any information about the woman other than what happened at this time in the temple area on that day during the Feast of Tabernacles. We're not told. But Jesus recognized the woman had sinned, and he told her, "I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more." She had an opportunity to start a new life. Just like we have the opportunity when we encounter Jesus to start a new life. And so Jesus said, "Go and sin no more." And like I said, did she, believe? We don't know. What happened beyond this, we're not told. But the woman encountered Jesus there that day in the temple, and had an opportunity to start a new life. Just like we have the opportunity to start a new life when we meet Jesus, when we hear the gospel about the Son of God and a man named Jesus. So it's quite interesting that let's see. And then I want to read something from our, we did the 7 feast studies, and I have a brochure that I gave to you, and I was going to refer back to it. There are, during the Feast of Tabernacles, which is what this is, there's 4 large lamps lit in the temple. And during the evening during the evening time of the worship, there would be some Levitical, they called it the Levitical orchestra would play their instruments. They would light these large lamps, and there would be some dancing, and they would sing praises. And so in our text today, Jesus is capturing what's going on because he's in the temple, and these lights that are lit as the day goes into the night. And so he's capturing that part. And Jesus says, he says, I am the light of the world. In other words, you got these 4 large lamps over here, but I'm the light that lights the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. He has just forgiven this lady. He's speaking to the people that have gathered back around, and he's letting him know, these 4 large lamps in the temple area are burning, but folks, I'm the light you need to be looking at, not looking at these 4 lamps that are burning over here in the temple area, but be looking at me. So Jesus is trying to capture that and, let them know he's the one they need to be looking for and looking to, instead of the lamps that are furnished by man. And he says, he who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And folks, that was, what this lady needed was the light of life. And that's what we need, and that's what we need to share, is that Jesus is the light, and that's who we should be following. And if we follow in Jesus, we won't be trapped by the things of Satan. Of course, the Pharisees aren't happy. Verse 13, the Pharisees therefore said to him, you bear witness of yourself. Your witness is not true. So they're once again, they're trying to question his identity. Jesus answered and said to them, even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true, for I know where I came from and where I am going. Folks, the most important thing is, do you know where you're going? Do you know where you're going? Jesus knew where he came from. I know where I came from. And I know where I'm going. And that each of us need to be able, to answer the same question. Do you know where you're going? But you do not know where I came from and where I am going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. And yet, if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, but I am with the Father who sent me. And once again, he's declaring his deity. This was something that the scribes and Pharisees didn't like. They thought he was blaspheming God. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. And that goes back to Deuteronomy chapter 22. Two witnesses. I am one who bears witness of myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness of me. So, two witnesses. Jesus witnessed, and God is his witness. Verse 19, then they said to him, where is your Father? They still ain't figured it out. Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. And notice in verse 20, these words Jesus spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple. No one laid hands on him, for his hour had not yet come. Now, the treasury was a place in the temple that had these little holes in the wall, and you would walk up and put your money in the little hole, and it would drop to a basket on the inside, and then the priest would gather it up. So he's, where people would pay their temple tax and so forth to keep up the temple and so forth. The little holes in the wall, and you'd stick your hand in there and drop it in there. There'd be a basket on the other side, and it would fall in there, and the Levites would come and collect the money up. So this is the area of the temple he's in, teaching, but no one laid a hand on him because it wasn't time, but his time is coming soon. So it's interesting how Jesus goes from this woman in adultery, and then he talks about being the light of the world, and then he goes in to discussing his deity, and he's right there in the temple. And yet they still don't know that he's the Messiah. I think some people more and more people, I believe, are coming to understand that. But, the opposition is growing because we know that once in John chapter 11, when he raises Lazarus from the dead, things really get hot because they know that a lot of people believed it because he raised Lazarus from the dead, and they think they have to stop him. It's interesting how, he comes on the scene and everybody rejects him. And it's true today. And it's unbelievable. With all the things that are going on in the world, just as the Bible predicted, and yet there's no God.
It's amazing how things mimic each other even today, especially in the political world. Somebody feels threatened, they do what they can to eliminate that threat.
Yeah, it is. It's it's interesting. It's nothing's changed in 2,000 years. It's the same today as it was when Jesus walked the roads in Israel. It's not changed. It's the same stuff, the same issues that are going on, were going on then are going on today. But we have to remember that who the light is and know where we're going. Know where we came from and know where we're going. That's the two most important things. Yes, Glenda.
The other day I was getting gas, it just reminded me of this, and I had never been to that particular station, and I was having trouble. So this guy was about to do his, he was over, and I said, can you help me over here, please? Just show me, he keeps sending my card back out. He came over and just did it for me so well, and as he walked away, God just reminded me, ask him if he knows Jesus. And I asked him, and he said, and the Father. He said, I know Jesus and the Father.
Amen.
And I love that. I love that. People are everywhere. You know, God just reminds me, ask him. He did something for me. So.
Amen.
You may have entertained an angel right there.
You never know. We don't know what we may encounter in our daily walk and where we may encounter it. A gas station, you know, you would think, not at a gas station. Why not at a gas station? I mean, you don't know. It's, you don't know. And we have, as the scripture says, we need to be able to give an account of the hope that we have. And we need to be able to speak. Yes.
I need to go. We got several things going on out there. A guy came in that his house was destroyed in Griffin. And he's basically homeless, living in some place with his son. And I got to meet him back out there. But I asked Leon to bring some of these. Gary and I like to give Bibles that go all over the world. They're not just in hotels, they go all over the world with the Gideons. And so I had Leon, he's in charge of that for our church. And we've been doing that in little flowers because it's in their name, the name's written in it. We did it for Mary Jo's daughter. And so if anybody would like it, I have some of these. Memory, and they're out there by the coffee. They're out there by the coffee too, so, but I need to go, we got so much going on out there.
Don't tell them, they got Don's,
You know, Gerald, I was
what's called, might still have that.
raised Methodist. And I mean, I know that's a bad word,
Oh,
Methodist.
no.
But I was baptized Methodist and raised Methodist until we moved to Pittsburgh, and then we became Presbyterians, which was in 1970. But I have an uncle that's a United Brethren preacher. I had my brother who was Church of Christ, and I have a niece. My daughter was a missionary. We come from a long thing. And it was funny because I thought that the Methodist, and today's lesson where it says, without sin, let him cast a stone. I heard that all through growing up and everything, but I never knew that it was about adultery and what our lesson was today.
Yeah. In other words, if anybody that doesn't have any sin, you know, throw the first stone. And nobody's without sin. I mean, we sin, but we confess it.
Do y'all know that Craig was Methodist before he became Baptist? Craig, he's told that story from the pulpit.
Oh yeah, we talked when we were in Poland. He told me all about him, and I had 3 long talks when I met him in Poland, and he's quite interesting. How he came to Hampton First Baptist. It's a miracle of God. Who would have thought 6,000 miles from Georgia you would find your next senior pastor? Only God can do that. It's nothing but God.
She
Are we
was
talking about,
Methodist.
our preacher?
Yeah,
Yeah, I knew that he was Methodist, because I mentioned Methodist to him, and he said that's what I was.
yeah, yeah. When I met Craig in Poland in 2006, yeah, we talked about our backgrounds and so forth.
Joe's actually one told me we had an opening here.
Hmm?
He's
Yeah.
the one that told me we had an opening here for youth pastor.
Oh,
Yeah, I was over there and we were talking, and we had, like I said, Craig and I had 3 long conversations, and the next thing you know, he's our youth pastor. And then now he's our senior pastor. Yeah, I first met Craig in 2006 in Poland in a graveyard. We're working in a Jewish cemetery doing restoration work.
well, I have to say that because, and I'm not trying to make points, but I think since you've become the teacher, I have myself personally have learned more than any from any teacher that I've had previously in church. In the
Well,
Methodist
it's
church.
not me, it's God, because He gives it to me. But thank you. I just try to dig in the Word and present it as such. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I'd like to make an interesting comment that I watched Huckabee last evening, and Pat Boone was his guest, and he's written a book, and on the cover, it's got one word, if. And if is mentioned in the Bible over 800 times. It's the most mentioned. He says it's not strictly although he's been a man of faith a long time, it's not necessarily a religious book, but but it parallels a lot that's going on. If you believe and repent, you'll be saved. And that was an interesting thing that I may want to read that quick.
He was a preacher, I think, for 15 or 20 years, wasn't he? Huckabee? I think he was.
I don't know about Huckabee. I know he was governor and so forth. I
think
don't
he
know,
was a
but
preacher at one time.
Yeah, I think he was, yeah.
I mean, he may have been. I don't
He
know.
had a good interview with Pat Boone, which I remember
Right.
being a crooner and singer when I was
I started saying now. Pat Boone, I can remember he used to sing a lot.
But he's always
Back in
shared
the
his
day.
faith. He's always
Right.
represented
Good man.
his faith.
Anybody got any other comments? Yes.
Is it time for prayer request?
It will be in 1 second. Okay, two real quick things. I sent out an email about the Tuesday meeting of what is it called now? The Golden Age?
Golden Age.
Yeah, the Golden Age Ministry meets Tuesday here.
Tuesday of every month.
First Tuesday of every month. I sent out an email with particulars about that. Number 2, don't forget, there's visitation tonight for Don Shelley over at the funeral home in McDonough. There's been several.
Cannon, Cleveland Funeral Home.
Is that right?
North 42.
Right. So don't forget that. And then the funeral for Don is tomorrow morning. Don't forget, those things. Now we can do prayer request.
I need to encourage you to pray for my sister Bunny. Billy put a info out about her having gallbladder surgery, and they did that in the middle of the night after she had had a CAT scan. And my sister is very, very sick. She is in the hospital. She's very small, tiny. She weighed 90 pounds when she went in. She doesn't weigh that now. And for some reason, the surgery was obviously a success, but took much longer than they thought.
in the meantime, she was in quite a bit of pain, and the doctor was not in the hospital. He's contacted another doctor who did not know her about pain medication. And some way or other, the one who actually ordered it did not know that she only weighed 90 pounds, and they gave her a full dose of very strong medication, and it had sent her into hallucinations. She lost all strength in her body, could not sit up, raise her head up off the bed. She was very, very serious. And they are hoping that when that dissipates from her, that they can regain some of the progress they've lost. But she's in really bad shape, and she doesn't have much confidence or desire that she's gonna get any better. So we're dealing with mental as well as physical conditions, and she's had a lot of things in her life. She's lost 2 children, and a husband, and several other things that have taken a toll on her. She likes this class and was very pleased to come, but then during COVID, she wouldn't go anywhere and has not been anywhere much since then.
I think she's fighting depression too.
What?
I think she might be fighting depression.
Oh, definitely.
Greatly.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And you know, she's quite a bit younger than I am. And I fuss at her all the time about get up, go out, do something, get an interest. But she sits and stays in the house. So we're concerned. Her 2 daughters are taking care of her and at the hospital, but they don't want company or anything like that. So I just would appreciate prayers.
Amen. And if you get a chance, send some cards. When she does get better, I'm sure she would appreciate hearing from members of the class as well.
Well, she always enjoys, you know, a phone call or whatever, but of course she can't do that now.
Right.
But we don't know how long she'll have to be in the hospital.